Morning, everyone. Welcome Northwestern. Welcome to Third Thursday, Sports and Performance Grand Rounds, hosted by Northwestern Health Sciences Human Performance Center and the Minnesota Chiropractic Association. Just as we usually start off the morning, we have paperwork in the back. The orange paperwork, everybody should be signing in with the orange paperwork. There's surveys as well on the orange papers. And then for the providers here that wish to have CEUs, it's the white or gray papers, depending on how I scanned it. But it's the white papers, so for the DCs looking for CEUs, please complete that paperwork. And I welcome our Facebook Live listeners and watchers. I'm excited for this topic. I've mentioned on Facebook on a Third Thursday site here, talking with a colleague of mine, that I've been in this industry for over a couple of decades, listened to some awesome speakers, been reading a lot, and this topic has never crossed my path. So it's been an exciting last couple months working with Dr. McDonald as she champions this topic. So I'm really excited to hear what she has to say, but I'll let her introduce herself as I usually do for Third Thursday. But again, I welcome you, and we'll turn it over to Dr. McDonald.
Thank you, Dr. Stark. I'm Melissa McDonald. I have been a licensed DC for almost 2 years now. I work in the Human Performance Center as the sports fellow, and I am primary for the Minnesota Vixen. This topic became important to me prior to my fellowship when I was working in the underserved population clinic, Pillsbury House, as a supervisor. And quite a few of our patients there are from the transgender population. And discussing with them where the shortcomings of healthcare is and where we're missing the boat taking care of them. That's when this became a topic that was of interest. Then with joining the Human Performance Center and working with the Minnesota Vixen, seeing that there's a need even within the professional athlete and how that has grown. Rio was the first Olympics that had in the books for transgendered athletes to participate. I'm going to start off with a video to really emphasize where we are right now. This event, the powerlifting event, occurred in Australia in March of this year.
New Zealand's first transgender woman to compete at the Australian International Weightlifting Competition pulled off a dominating performance at this year's event, but some of her competitors are saying she had an unfair advantage. The New Zealand Herald says 39-year-old Laurel Hubbard set 4 unofficial national records at the event on March 19th. The second place finisher lifted about 19 kilograms or 41 pounds less than her. Hubbard was born as a male and was a competitive weightlifter before transitioning to a female in her mid-30s. One competitor told New Zealand's One News Now, quote, "We all deserve to be on an even playing field. It's difficult when you believe that you're not." Others have also publicly questioned if it's fair for Hubbard to compete as a woman. Hubbard passed all necessary qualifications to compete in the event as a female, which includes a testosterone test. For Newsfeed Social, I'm Mila Uni.
So this is definitely occurring on the international stage of athletics and is becoming a more prevalent concern even in high schools. So this is something that can definitely walk into your office and something you're going to be dealing with. First and foremost, I want to just give you an outline of how this presentation is going to flow this morning. We're going to go over some general terminology and definitions. A lot of times, one of the first mistakes as provider is we do not use the pronoun designated by the athlete. We use their legal name versus their chosen name, or we use what they consider their dead name, and we just do some microaggressions. So I really want to make sure that we understand the terminology of how to communicate appropriately with a transgendered individual. And then just going through the history of gender norms in athletics. There is a history of how we separated sports by the sexes, and this has led to the controversy of how does a transgendered athlete join and participate in sports. We will then go through the policies. So the laws dictated from the international to the collegiate level all the way into the high school level in K through 12. Then at the very end, we'll go through clinical consideration and sport-specific injuries to be aware of when working with this population. Merriam-Webster Dictionary, just a definition, is related to being a person whose gender identity differs from the sex the person had when identified at birth. This is just an umbrella term for anyone who identifies or behavior falls beyond the outside of the stereotypical norm. It refers to individuals whose gender identity does not match their birth at gender. Keep that in mind. They're not synonymous terms. So when working with them, you'll have biological sex, gender, and sexual orientation. So you can have a biological male that identifies as a female, that is straight because they date males. Or recently in the news, there is an Oregon couple where you had a cisgendered, so born male, identifies male, that is gay, whose transgender male husband are now expecting their first biological child. So this is kind of the population and how to take that into consideration. This is a really nice, kind of cheesy diagram. I found it amusing, but it really helps emphasize that point. So you have the gender unicorn. You have the gender identity, which is whether they view themselves as female, male, or some other non-binary gender. They may want to stay in an androgynous and use the pronouns of they and them versus using he or she, which as a provider can be uncomfortable if you're not used to using those terms. And I've had arguments with individuals discussing that they is not singular, yet I challenge you not to use it as a singular. It can do both. Gender expression, whether they're feminine or masculine, because you can have someone that is female, identifies a woman, yet be masculine in how they express their gender. Sex assigned at birth, you can have female, male, or intersex. A lot of times within the intersex population, which we will go over, they don't know that they're intersex until one, they're either competing at a high enough level to require testing, or two, they are trying to have children and are having issues with conceiving, and they go through testing and they find out that they're actually intersex. Physically attracted to, just depends, and are emotionally attracted to. So I found this as a nice, just simple diagram to kind of explain that out. So into the history. Purpose of sports. So the modern Olympic times started in 1896. Females weren't initially allowed to compete at that first Olympics. They didn't join until the 1900s. And this was really centered around physical displays of strength, competition, and there was a risk of injury. So they didn't want women to compete because that didn't fit with the social norms of the time of what a woman was. Stay at home, take care of the family, cook the dinners, that kind of things. Also at this time, women were really only educated to a high school level because any education beyond that wasn't needed to be a homemaker. So in that first Olympics, there were 22 female athletes that competed. It was very small. They did non-aggressive sports. So there was a little bit of running, a little bit of gymnastics. Really in 1924 is when there was a first significant women's program. And that is when we had Dora Radigan and Stella Wash come on scene. And those were two prevalent female athletes that didn't quite fit the gender stereotypes. The other issue within the 1924-1936 area of the World Games and the Olympics was it was a way for nations to compete while the war was going on, And so there was cheating on both sides in the male division and the female division. All right, so we have Radigan and Walsh. So Dora Radigan later in the 1950s came out as Hydrant Radigan, and there were two theories that were portrayed in the 1950s. Well, in the 1950s, they adamantly said that he was forced by the Nazi Party to compete as a woman. He placed fourth in the high jump, and he was one of the reasons utilized to institute gender testing in the 1950s and 60s. But more recent research has come out and that he was misgendered at birth, in that he had non-discriminate genitalia. So when he was born, they labeled him as a female. So at the time he competed, he didn't know that he was cheating. And it was a case of human error so he was raised as a woman and then transitioned later in life. Walsh, at the time of competition, was the best sprinter, best javelin thrower, and ultimately one of the most dominating female athletes of the time. The controversy came up actually when she died in the 1980s, and she was actually murdered. And on autopsy, the autopsy was released, and that she had ambiguous genitalia, which led to the belief that she cheated when she competed in the 1930s, because they said, oh, look, we had a male competing in the female division, and that is why she dominated. But in the 1930s, there wasn't any controversy considering that. And I found this great video of her actually competing.
This is Charles E. presenting another sports show, showing you something of interest to all sports fans. This week, you meet two of the world's greatest women athletes, Miss Walsh on your left and Miss Weiss, both from Poland. Miss Weiss holds the world record for putting the shot. Here she is doing her stunt, and again in slow motion. She throws the shot about 40 feet, remarkable for a girl of 21. Now watch Miss Weiss throw the discus. She has broken the world's record 3 times this year, and her best throw is nearly 145 feet. Poland is proud of her and sent her to America for the Olympic Games. Now for Miss Walsh, perhaps the most amazing woman athlete in the world. Here she is throwing a javelin, just one of her many athletic achievements. She has won 9 out of 11 events at the Polish Championships. She has a race with a man opponent. There's perfect action for you. Man is always chasing woman, but in this case doesn't stand a chance. Study the start this way, and you get a good idea of her style. Now she is traveling at top speed, but slowed down by the slow motion camera, and still being chased by that man. A real race against other first-rate women runners, but she beats them all easily. By the way, in case you're interested, she is a vegetarian. Maybe that helps.
I thought that was funny. But as you can see, they did not see her as having any gender ambiguity at the time. She was put as a first-rate world-class female athlete. It didn't come about until the 1980s when the controversy was stirred and they tried to strip her of all her medals. The next one was the Derbyshire Wonder. This was the same time that Stella Walsh and Dora Radigan were competing, and this was an instance when they embraced a mistaken identity. So competed from 1925 to 1934, competed as Mary, and then after done competing, went through a series of operations and became Mark. It was really the first positive press that ever occurred concerning a transgendered athlete. He was never forced to return any titles and ruled at the time that he competed within the rules of the time and was not trying to cheat the system or cheat the gender boundaries, which was what happened to Stella Walsh and Dora. Now, 1950s roll around and sex verification testing started to occur. It all started in the 1940s with the International Amateur Athletic Federation, the IAAF, and they required all female athletes that were going to be competing internationally to bring certification of their eligibility to compete. Now, and then this was later adopted by the Olympic Committee. The issue with this testing is they didn't dictate who would perform it, so any country could have any doctor do it, and as long as they brought a birth certificate or a national ID that stated they were female, they were allowed to compete in the female division, which led to further verification testing. So in the 1960s, the certification was deemed untrustworthy, and a new standard of scientific tests were put in place, which consisted of the visual exam. They would have the naked parade, where female athletes would have to parade in front of 3 doctors to determine whether they were female enough to compete. And they would judge them both on primary sexual characteristics and secondary characteristics. There was an instance where an American shot putter heard a sprinter from another country discussing the fact that they were not allowed to compete in this event because they didn't have large enough breasts to be considered female enough to compete. But when you look at a traditional female athlete, they do not fit the stereotypical norms of an everyday female. So these sex verification testing really were just starting to put a cap on what the athletic level of a female athlete could compete at. Because if anybody was too strong, too fast, did not fit the stereotypical norms, they were deemed masculine and kicked out. This really puts a stop to having any advancement within female athletics and puts a cap on how well we can actually perform. So after the 1960s, or late 1960s, they actually started including a manual exam, which a lot of the athletes described as a grope. In the 1970s and 80s, the visual exam was eliminated and they went straight to the bar body test. It was done by a buccal swab and actually test for the XX and XY bar bodies to determine whether the athlete was male or female. It was easy to use, just required a stain and a microscope. The issue is that there is more than just XX and XY. There are phenotypes where you have XXY and you have XO. And this can have a greater effect on sports performance than just going off of that. Plus, when you look at an athlete, the physiology and just frankly their phenotype is more important than their gender. If you look at Michael Phelps, the greatest male swimmer, and you look at how he's built, he was born with extraordinarily long arms, short torso, long legs, makes him a better swimmer. Should he be eliminated for swimming because he was born that way and it's not fair to the other athletes? Another one is there was a male cross-country skier from Switzerland that had a genetic modification that caused him to produce higher amounts of hemoglobin. So he processed oxygen better at higher altitudes. Should he have been excluded simply because he was born that way and had a genetic variant that allowed him to perform better in sports? When you get into elite athletes, there are genetic variations that cause them to be elite athletes over the everyday athlete. The bar body came into controversy in the mid-1980s when the Spanish hurdler Maria Martinez Pino, sorry if I mispronounce it, failed it. She came up as having an XY. It was then determined that she has androgen insensitivity syndrome. What that means is she does have internal testicles. She just is unable to process testosterone. So all in the womb, we all start off as female, and then it's the testosterone that allows the male characteristics to develop. Her body does not allow for that testosterone to take effect. So she is a male by the characteristics of having testes and having XY, but only exhibits female characteristics. This would be considered an intersex athlete. She was, when she failed, it was suggested to her that she should feign an injury and quietly leave competition. She refused. She competed and won, and they stripped her of her medals, and then she went through an appeals process and was able to successfully win and have all her wins reinstated and change the ruling on how an androgen insensitive athlete was able to compete. So what is the effects? I've kind of been talking about it while we've been going. It causes an upper limit for women's sporting performance. Currently, they've gotten rid of blanket testing. What that means is prior to the 1990s, every female athlete that wanted to compete internationally had to have a test confirming their gender identity and that they were female. In the 1990s, because of the controversy of the test being ineffective, having too many false positives, they eliminated that testing. But they have it so that if there is any question, such as having a masculine body type, they can enforce testing. Within the male athlete, there is no physiological upper limit, and there is, if a female wants to compete against the men, they can just go compete. There is no difference. The other thing that took into removing blanket testing is with all the doping regulations in malls, they were already doing blood tests to ensure testosterone levels and other cheating methods that way, and they didn't feel that doing specific sex verification testing was pertinent. The issue with just relying on doping is there are inherent conditions that can cause increased testosterone in a female athlete, such as polycystic ovarian syndrome, or if they have a androgen syndrome. With that, there was a change in culture. In 1992, the IAAF, which was the ones that initially instituted the sex testing, stopped all testing requirements. The Olympics was a little bit, took a little more time to catch up. And actually the last time they required testing was at the Atlanta Olympics. And at that one in particular, they had 8 athletes fail the bar exam and then were able, through appeals, to still compete in the Olympics. Although the sex of the athlete can come into question, so anytime an athlete's sex comes into question, they can be required to go physiological, genetic, hormonal, and psychological testing. And I have some examples of when this occurred recently in 2010. All right, so let's talk about policies. Where is the stance coming from on how transgendered athletes, so we're going to go back into that, because you have to understand where the female athlete and why we have these gender divisions to fully understand how the transgendered athlete fits into athletics. So the IOC policy, any female to male is eligible to compete in the male category without restrictions. So they just blanket statement that if you have a female to male athlete, they're able to compete. It is when you have a male to female, they have to fit into one of these, they have to apply, or they have to follow these 4 categories. They have to declare their gender identity as female, and it has to be for a minimum of 4 years. So prior to being eligible to compete, They have to be a female and living as a female for 4 years. They have to demonstrate that her testosterone level serum is below 10 nanomolars per liter in the last 12 months prior to her first competition. If the athlete's testosterone levels do not remain below that, then they immediately restart the clock on that 12-month period. Otherwise, they're eligible to compete. Compliance with these conditions are monitored by testing. So going back to Laurel Hubbard, the athlete that competed in the powerlifting competition in Australia, she met and was compliant with all the rules and regulations set up by the international committees for her to compete in that powerlifting competition. So although there are biologically select female athletes that are unhappy that Laurel won, she competed within the rules, and it is her right to be able to do that. So, hyperandrogen syndrome in the female athlete. This is another issue that can occur that can cause increased testosterone. So this is an Indian sprinter who was suspended for 2 years due to failing a testosterone test in 2014. She sued saying, I'm female, I've always competed as a female. I'm sorry, my testosterone test came back. She is from a small village in India, actually had no idea what she was having testing performed. She wasn't explained what was going on until after the test came back and they said, sorry, you are ineligible to compete because we think you have too much male hormone. The testing was put in place because someone said that her stride was too aggressive and she had too masculine of arms. And that is why she was forced to go through gender testing. Because of everything that went on with Judy Chen, they have had to change policies on what they consider testosterone levels in a female if they have no use of hormones, and it's really become a mess. The policies, they tried to update the policy, then it got changed. They're really sitting in a hard place with this one. Another individual that has been going through issues is Caster Semenya from South Africa. She has dominated in the women's 800-meter run, the 400-meter run. She was suspended in 2009, but then reinstated after passing all her gender verification testing. And I just think about what the Olympics is for. It is to contribute to building a peaceful and better world by educating youth through sport practiced without discrimination of any kind in the spirit of friendship, solidarity, and fair play. I pulled that from the Olympic website. With a lot of these athletes that are put through sex verification testing, if they fail and are stripped of their wins and yet have done nothing wrong, quite a few of them actually commit suicide. Because they are ostracized in their country, they are tortured by the media, they are yelled at for cheating, and they just end it. We are causing these athletes to do that. It's just not right. The NCAA has policies specific to a female-to-male athlete. In this case, if a female-to-male athlete is allowed to take testosterone, but then if they're taking testosterone, they can only compete in the male division. If a female-to-male transition decides to not take testosterone, they can compete in either division. So they can either go with the team that is fits with their gender, or they can go with their biological sex at that point. It all is based on their choice with hormones. And it is not required for a transgendered individual to take hormones to transition. That is the choice, each individual's choice on how they want to complete their gender affirmation journey. Now, if you have a male to female athlete, they do have to have the hormones to compete in the female division, versus if they are taking hormones, they would then only be allowed to compete in the male division. Now, so we've talked internationally, we've talked at the college level. Now we have the K through 12 school policy, and this varies by state. And really, when you look at it, children, no matter what their gender identity is, they should be allowed to experience the benefit of sports when it comes to the physical, mental, and social aspects. By allowing them to participate, you're, one, after affirming their gender. When you look at the statistics of what transgendered individuals deal with, when they are fighting their biological sex, when they know that, so if you have a female who knows that they're male and you're forcing them into the gender stereotype of a female, they're depressed, they're anxious, they have suicidal ideation. This is one of the populations of people that commit suicide and are successful at completing it. How can we support them? One is allowing them to compete at the gender that they specify with. Now, within the states, this was a map pulled from the website Trans Athlete. It is put on by Chris Moser. He is the first transgender athlete to compete for the U.S. Olympic Committee, and he is a distance runner. And what this is you have a variety of states. So 8 states, which are the blue one, have no policy on the books concerning transgender athletes. 7 states, which are the red ones, have discriminatory policies. And that can either be that their gender-based on their birth certificate is what they, or their sex-based on their birth certificate is what they have to compete at. They may have surgical requirements, or that the transition has to occur prior to the start of puberty. North Carolina has one of the most discriminatory policies, and it prevents trans athletes from participating and only off their biological sex. It also has locker room and bathroom ban policy that prevents someone from using the gender of choice restrooms. Texas, being one of the most discriminatory, just had the Texas state champ for wrestling was a transgender male forced to compete in the female division. This athlete stated in newsreels, "I didn't want to fight girls. I want to wrestle the boys, but they're forcing me, and I don't want to give up a sport I love just because they won't let me wrestle in the division I want to." The thing is based on Texas policy, that athlete was legally taking testosterone for their transition and still forced to compete in the women's division. So now you have a transgender male on testosterone fighting females. You are in a lose-lose situation with this athlete. So now they're being ostracized in the news, because I saw this story come across the Minnesota back in January news feed, and now they're in a fight, and they may not even be allowed to compete come next year to defend their title, or vice versa, not allowed to compete at all. They'll be a senior next year. Then you have yellows, which need some modification and are a case-by-case basis, and that's about 20 states. And then there are 15 states that are inclusive. And what that means is they do not require hormonal treatment of the athletes to compete in the gender they want, or surgery. Minnesota is one of those inclusive policies that if you have a transgender student, they are not required to have surgery or take any hormones, and they can compete in whatever sport that they would like, which is fantastic. So into the important clinical considerations. Within the sex and gender minorities, they were officially recognized as a disparity population, and this occurred in 2016. So this population of people do not seek healthcare services outside of getting their hormones because of how they are treated within the doctor's office. Within that population, 31% that do actually see doctors have not told their healthcare provider that they're transgender. They have transitioned to a point that their appearance matches their gender, which is fantastic, and they have chosen not to tell their provider that they are transgender for fear of how they will be treated. Within the barriers of healthcare, there is verbal harassment, refusal of care, unnecessary or invasive questioning, or they just go to a provider that is uneducated in the care that they need. And this can consist of simply understanding that if you have a female to male patient, that although they still have a uterus, an ovaries, and they may need to have a gynecological exam, it can really destroy their emotional well-being to have that or be questioned on it. So it may be an uncomfortable position for you as a provider, but when dealing with a transgender patient, you may want to ask them if they have assigned different names to their genitalia so that you can refer to them in a trans-friendly way. So they may have, if you have a female to male, rename their clitoris a penis. And that is how they refer to it. And you need to respect that for them. And that's very uncomfortable as a provider to ask those questions and have that open dialogue with them. With intake paperwork, it is incredibly challenging for a transgendered individual to change their name. It can cost them up to $300 a court date and having witnesses confirm that this is who they are and this is how they would like to change their name for them to actually complete it. So they may, on their driver's license, still have their legal name and legal sex versus having their name of choice and their gender of choice, because that is just how the system works right now. So having blank boxes for them just to fill in versus having check boxes allows for the variety of information to be taken. Then with that paperwork, because their legal name may go through all their insurances, you need to use their chosen name so that they feel comfortable coming to your office. It's a common mistake that occurs when you have a patient that has two different names to call them by the wrong name if you're moving quickly, and that can make them feel alienated. There are some provisions within the Affordable Care Act that provides protection, but not all care is covered. A lot of gender affirmation care is out-of-pocket costs. And with the fact that this population has a high risk of mental illness, within the depression, anxiety, trying to fit into their gender, to what gender, and then dealing with having all the surgeries, if they decide to go that route, that becomes extraordinarily expensive. Depending upon the level of surgery, it can be $25,000 to $30,000 to complete gender affirmation surgery, so it's not always possible within the U.S. for them to do that, and it's not covered unless they're diagnosed with gender dysmorphia, which then puts a psychological stigma to their gender. But granted, now in the DSM-5, I believe they have dropped gender dysmorphia as an actual psychological condition, so they can no longer be put through trying to remove that or put into treatment to try to correct it. When having a patient come in looking past their transgenderedness. So if they come in with shortness of breath, don't just think if it's a male to female that it's from their chest finding. So a male to female, to deal with the fact that they may have gone through puberty and they may have had breast develop, will bind their chest so they appear flat. and that can reduce breathing. It can have issues if they're participating in sport like that. But don't also ignore the fact that it could be allergies, they could have asthma, they could have some other condition going on. The other thing is if they're on hormone therapy, don't assume all their conditions are coming from the hormones, although when you are transitioning, especially taking testosterone, there are a lot of musculoskeletal complaints that we as musculoskeletal specialists can best care for them. When they go to the doctor and we mispronounce them or use their birth name or dead name, it can trigger body dysmorphia. So we can cause them to have even more issues within coming into their gender. So we as providers need to do our best to make them feel welcome and that we are a individual that can care for them safely. They no longer want the term preferred because it is not their preferred gender, it is not their preferred pronoun, it is their pronoun and it is their gender. Within the trans population, 50% of them have seriously considered suicide and 25% have attempted. So if you're talking to one of them, they've probably at some point had suicidal ideations. It's kind of terrifying when you consider a main cause of it is having providers not take care of them. So, moving past that into sports injury considerations. This is where it gets really, because it's so new, there aren't any real good epidemiological studies. I did find a case study discussing female to male and distance running having an increased risk of stress fracture. When you have a female to male athlete as well, do they follow the typical female injury pattern of increased ACL risk or increased knee injury? Is there the chest binding? And then with how that affects the cardiovascular system, these are just things you need to take into consideration with managing these patients. That's a picture from this past weekend of our Minnesota Vixen, which they're a unique population of individuals that are great fun to work with and have really emphasized the point of how to manage a transgendered athlete. Any questions? Yeah.
So you just touched on it a little bit about studies and injury. If you had a male to female that is now not on testosterone but is on estrogen or estradiol, is there any studies that show increased healing rate or diminished healing rates or any type of effects on how the body would heal?
Not that I've been able to find concerning estrogen. Within a female athlete, there's progesterone issues and progesterone effects on ligament laxity, but with estrogen specifically, not as much, although theoretically they should have a protectiveness concerning their cardiovascular system with how that cycles. It's a complicated piece. So I honestly have not found anything personally, but if someone has, I'd be open.
I had a question with this sprinter that had bigger arms and then had to go undergo testing. I don't understand, did she have a vagina? I
Yes.
guess until they're still making them go
Yes.
through testing. I don't understand why they do that.
Okay, so the question was, with the sprinter that had the bigger arms and was forced to undergo testing, I believe this one or this athlete here. So basically, because of their dominance within their sport, they were forced to undergo sex verification testing. And the reasoning for that simply is people saying that they were trying to cheat the system. So they were forced to go under, there it is. So whenever that occurs, they are forced to go under physiological, genetic, hormonal, and psychological testing. Both those athletes were born and sexed as female when they were born. They do have vaginas, but they have an increased testosterone rate because they have hyperandrogen syndrome. So they are female athletes that just inherently produce more testosterone. And because of that, both were disqualified for a short period of time, but then were reinstated. And I do know that the athlete from India competed in Rio. Didn't place above, didn't make the finals or anything, but she did compete.
But most Olympic athletes, don't they have increased testosterone for females? So why wouldn't all of the female athletes then in the Olympics have to be tested for that?
You're right. So why target out one? And it's simply because they don't fit the stereotypical norms of what a female looks like. That's where this is causing, I mean, if you have a female athlete that doesn't fit the gender norms of what a female should look like, they're forced into sex testing. Is it fair? No, but this is what we're dealing with right now. This is why female athletics can't go beyond where they're at, because anytime an athlete does something amazing, they're forced to go through this testing, and if they don't fit in, so I know both of the athletes here tested with the low level of a male athlete, and they were like, nope, they're kicked out, and then were able to appeal and be reinstated. But imagine how traumatizing that is for that athlete. I do know Caster Semenya, she basically doesn't, since competing in Rio, has not really been seen, just to protect herself. Any other questions? It is a complex, uncomfortable topic when it is not something that is just becoming really prevalent. And it's why I felt it was so important to bring about. Now, some resources is the Transstudent Educational Resource, just kind of goes over, this is where I got the gender unicorn, just how to better communicate, and then there's the trans athlete. And that has all the updated policies and regulations, also has some additional resources for athletes on there as well, and just discusses the effects of hormones and how they either benefit and bring a female to male trans athlete to competitive status, or prevent a male to female athlete from having a statistical advantage. Granted, if you aren't comfortable asking questions here, you can absolutely email me or call me in my office, and I'd be happy to have the conversation, go over whatever you would like. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Dr. McDonald. That was awesome. Very educational, very informative, very contemporary topic. And thank you for attending this morning here at Northwestern. Thank you for joining us on Facebook Live. Next month, third Thursday of July, we'll be back here again. The topic will be discussing athletes and a therapy that's certainly got a growing popularity, and that's lasers, different types of lasers that can be used for managing athletes in regards to performance as well as injury management. So we hope to see you in July. Thanks again.